Hello and welcome to Health Quest, dedicated to nutrition and your good health. Support for Health Quest has been provided by some of America's best nutritional companies. And now, Health Quest with your host, Steve Lankford.
Hello, and welcome back to Health Quest Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Lankford. Thanks for joining me. I'm glad you're here. This is going to be an interesting exploration for me for a couple of reasons. One, I'm going to be talking to a new guest expert, and that's always interesting, getting to pick the brain of somebody who is deeply involved in the science of nutrition and good health. It's also a topic that I haven't discussed for many years, since actually before I started the podcast, back in the radio days. I first heard about this interesting ingredient called beta-glucan, but I've not done an in-depth discussion with anyone on the value of beta-glucan. So that's going to be the subject of our topic today. My guest is going to be Jay Hyeok. Jay is the technical consultant for Vesta Ingredients. Vesta Ingredients is a raw material manufacturer. If you've been a regular listener to Health Quest Podcast, you know that I'm a big fan of trademarked raw materials, these products that are created specifically by companies and then are tested and clinically evaluated. And this is how we get to products that have amazing benefits in human health. When someone asks, how do you know something is good for the immune system? Well, how do we know? Well, we might have historical evidence, anecdotal evidence, and that's always important. It leads us into the scientific inquiry. But how do we as consumers actually know that something is really good? We have to look to the sources. And if you know anything about me, you know that I'm all about the distinctions in the marketplace. What makes the difference? How do you have confidence in a particular product? And how do you have confidence in a particular raw material? So there's this whole chain of trust that has to be developed between the companies that make the raw materials and the companies that buy those raw materials and use them in supplements, and the stores that trust those companies and bring those products to you as a consumer. This is a long chain of trust, and you need to have trustworthy resources. It's one of the reasons that we do this podcast, is to help introduce you to these concepts, to introduce you to companies that you can have confidence in. And we love to explore these companies because they do these innovative things. And this is how we as consumers get to benefit. So in today's discussion with Jay, we're going to be talking about beta-glucan. What's it made from? What to look for? What do the scientific studies tell us? As I said, this is one that I'm very much interested in, and it's in that capacity I'm pleased to introduce to you Jay Hyeok. Jay, welcome to Health Quest Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really interested in this, and one of the things I forgot to mention is that in your education, part of your expertise was geared around looking at tissue damage and intercellular pathways related to inflammation and immunomodulation. That's an interesting phrase to me because I've come to believe that inflammation is such a primary factor in so many of the health challenges that we have, and that there are ways that we as human beings can live a healthier lifestyle, perhaps, and avoid a more damaging lifestyle in order to improve our own immune system. These are days when a lot of people are thinking about, how do I improve my immune system and maintain my health as best I can? So I'm looking forward to hearing your understanding of the science and maybe giving us a good consumer primer on that topic. Before we start on the topic of beta-glucan, though, could you just tell us a little bit about your background and how it is that you became interested in this topic and what led you to being involved with Vesta Ingredients?
I initially received my PhD doctorate. As you mentioned, my thesis centered around inflammatory signaling in the context of wound repair and cancer. And my work really traversed everywhere from utilizing cell line-based models to animal models and even to analyzing clinical samples, utilizing various endpoints. I currently serve as a scientific advisor and technical assistant at Vesta Nutra. And how I started off in conventional sort of biomedical research and came into the nutraceutical industry and specifically Vesta was that I first became interested in functional natural ingredients during my studies. I would frequently use synthetic compounds and drugs developed by various pharmaceutical companies all the time. And oftentimes, I would frequently notice the warning labels that list out all sorts of sort of dangerous and fortuitous impacts that come with these therapies. And certainly, these therapies are extremely well founded and grounded in true science, and they certainly have their place among our therapeutic arsenal. However, a lot of the off-target effects and the toxicities associated kind of made me pivot towards and look at the natural ingredients categories, which I felt provide a really nice way of naturally utilizing what nature provides. Still under the same level of sort of scientific scrutiny, we're able to reap the benefits that are offered by these natural ingredients. And I guess in surveying and looking across various companies, trying to find a match for my what now is current position, I landed on Vesta Ingredients, where they seem to align very highly with my own personal values, which is that the priority for me is that we not fall victim or fall into the trap of being snake oil salesmen. Really, I firmly believe in the science backing certain functional ingredients. And this same value and standards are upheld at Vesta, particularly with Sam Kwan, who's the technical director and founder. And he and I really saw eye to eye on the importance of really doing thorough vetting of functional ingredients before adding those products to their line of products to offer. And so it really was the level of due diligence, quality control, and really thorough vetting of these ingredients that are fundamentally scientifically backed that I really appreciated. And so that's how I ended up here at Vesta Ingredients.
I love stories like that. And of course, that's why I have emphasized this so much with my listeners is if you want a good product, find a good company. And if you want something that has scientific study to it, go to using that raw material and that ingredient because that's the one that's been studied. So what I'd like to know, again, before we get into beta-glucan, tell us a little bit more then about Vesta. What is it that they do in the marketplace? Who is their primary customer? And how do they look to meet the needs in today's marketplace?
Vesta Ingredients has actually been around for over 20 years, and they've really been a market leader with respect to offering really high-quality brand raw ingredients to fundamentally ensure the success of our clientele with respect to their health needs. And once again, a lot of the process in which Vesta Ingredients surveys a lot of functional ingredients out there, they essentially take a really hard look at the scientific backing, and ask the fundamental question, do we truly believe in the efficacy of this given ingredient? And would it really provide the health benefits that the claims are made under which these ingredients might function? And in that way, we end up filtering out quite a bit of, one could say, hogwash or superfluous ingredients. And in that way, once we start deciding to invest in the particular ingredients that we provide, you can be sure that we fully believe in it and are fully committed to their legitimacy. So with that said, sort of the nutraceutical ingredients that Vesta provides ranges in predominantly within dry powders, largely, again, in the nutraceutical space, and also a subset that does range in cosmetics for topical application.
So what you're describing then is you are a company that makes these innovative ingredients available to supplement manufacturers. And those then make the supplements that end up in bottles and other preparations that we as consumers can purchase. So one of the primary sources for these quality, trademark, clinically studied raw materials. Is that a fair assessment then of Vesta?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, then let's use beta-glucan as an example. We're going to explore it in depth. So with light to, say, our discussion about quality and raw materials and bring that into discussion when it's appropriate, let's look more in depth at beta-glucan. Let's start off with what is beta-glucan.
Beta-glucan is essentially this BD glucose polysaccharide, and that sort of description comes from a very specific type of bond that forms between the molecules. And this particular polysaccharide, as they call it, are highly conserved and naturally occurring in the cell walls of eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. So a very long-winded way of saying that it's a very natural product that exists throughout various areas within the span of nature. Beta-glucan is one of the most well-studied immunomodulators, with more than, I believe last time I checked, more than 6,000 publications investigating its positive impact on the immune system within humans. A lot of these studies, I guess from a 10,000-foot view, have really found that the consumption of beta-glucan has led to significant decreases in a lot of common ailment symptoms that are pathogenically derived, and furthermore, have honestly offered a really substantive prophylactic effect for consumers. And as a polysaccharide, beta-glucan is relatively benign in function, but is potently recognized by our immune system to help increase and rev up our pathogen surveillance system, so to speak.
So is this something that then when we take beta-glucan, the body recognizes this particular molecular configuration and that it somehow then stimulates aspects of the immune system by its unique configuration? Have I got a sense of that at all?
Essentially, what happens is that one of the mechanisms by which beta-glucan stimulates immune response is by functioning as what's known as a pathogen-associated molecular pattern, or PAMP for short, PAMP. So these PAMPs are really typically common found molecular shapes that reside on microbes and pathogens, typically on their surfaces. It's because of this that our body has developed processes to recognize those specific molecular shapes, also known as, again, PAMPs. And basically, these PAMPs interact with specific recognition receptors in our body that are called toll-like receptors, or TLRs, and essentially activate these really vital immune cells called white blood cells. They're a key part of our immune system's early response and detection of infection. And these activated immune cells are versatile in function by ridding our bodies of pathogens through this consumption mechanism called phagocytosis, and by stimulating other immune cells that come in and kind of help get rid of the body of those invading pathogens. By inducing this sort of enhanced surveillance mode with beta-glucan, it really aids the activation of the immune system for sort of better clearance of potential future pathogens that might come into our bodies to harm it.
That's interesting, the idea of its effect on pathogenic organisms, or are there also pathogenic substances? Could you describe that a little more for us? What does that mean?
Yeah, so to clarify, this molecule in particular serves as a mimic or a mimetic that looks like the molecular shape of what certain pathogens might present within our body that normally have sort of a ability to rev up our immune system. And so by providing that mimicking component, although the molecule itself is extremely safe and has pretty much no impact that's sort of negative to our health, however, what they do is by mimicking these particular molecular shapes that a lot of pathogens, which are very harmful microbes that lead to a lot of the diseases that we know, a lot of bacteria, viruses, etc., by mimicking what they typically present, it basically turns on and wakes up our immune system. And in doing so, if in the event that a certain pathogen does breach our walls and gets into our body, if our immune system is already woken up with beta-glucan and is already prepared and awake to better detect and surveil our body, they're able to better fight off and combat a lot of these, again, sort of microbes, bacteria, viruses that might try to come and do harm.
It's so interesting what I'm learning from you. So let me see if I'm keeping up with you here. Does that suggest that when we talk about our immune system, that it's really a very complex system and some aspects of it are geared towards dealing with pathogens? And we might be dealing with that here in this case, and that something else might be better for other aspects of the immune system. So it's not like that this does everything that the immune system needs, but it does what it does very specifically and very well, and that's to aid our immune system as it defends our bodies against these pathogens. Is that a reasonable understanding at that point?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's like if we understand that beta-glucan is particularly good for, say, helping us fight bacteria, microbes, viruses, that would help us target its use at, say, particular times. The cold and flu season, for example, might be an example of when we might want to boost our beta-glucan as a defense. Is that a strategy that you could see coming out of this?
You hit the nail on the head again. Essentially, this beta-glucan offers the ability for us to wake up our immune cells, which are normally at baseline, in some sense, at a snooze level. And essentially, we can prophylactically, by taking beta-glucan, sort of give our immune system a slight nudge and help in the right direction to say, hey, wake up a little bit, time to pay attention. And to your point, that allows a little bit more empowerment and autonomy for us to then, as consumers, know if there's a particular time that I need to take it, as you alluded to during flu season or while you might be traveling. It really offers a nice temporal flexibility and ability to control in a prophylactic manner our ability to combat any potential microbes that we might run into.
Now, does the source of beta-glucan make a difference? Are there different sources? Are there even different molecular configurations? And does that make a difference? So, for example, if as a consumer I see something that says beta-glucan, that doesn't really tell me all that I need to know. So give us sort of an understanding of what maybe makes the better, more effective forms of beta-glucan.
So not all beta-glucans are made the same. It's the particular 1,3-D linkage that I was mentioning earlier that really matters. And what it is it's this particular configuration of the ways that the molecules are arranged. This 1,3-D glycosidic link in the backbone of the molecule really offers a very special and specific content of carbon linkage between positions 1 and 3, hence 1,3-D. And this particular molecular configuration is really what's been shown in the literature, scientific studies, to be more effective than other strains such as 1,4 or 1,6. And the 1,3-D has, in having that higher efficacy, is sort of ultimately the thing that a lot of consumers might want to look into. So just because it says beta-glucan doesn't necessarily mean that they're all equally effective in helping to provide the immune boost.
I was just going to interject here. We've talked about the value of trademark branded raw materials, and I just want to mention the beta-glucan that we are talking about has a public name called Beta Immune Shield. Do I understand that correctly? This is what we're talking about?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay, so if you're looking as a consumer for this product, look for this name on the bottle. Companies that buy trademarked raw materials will tell you it is this brand. And so you can actually ask for that. So thanks for letting me interject that here. So we are talking about a specific form of beta-glucan, not the same as every other form, from a specific company. Tell us about the benefits of your beta-glucan and perhaps some examples, maybe the most impressive clinical studies you're aware of.
Given the importance of that 1,3-D configuration, here at Vesta, we took extensive measures to enrich for this particular subtype of beta-glucans. As you alluded to, beta immune shield is extracted using our heavily invested proprietary manufacturing technique that provides sort of the highest purity and, of course, the most effective form of this molecule in our raw ingredient. And we have a lot of these studies that help provide the compelling evidence of immune stimulation. Again, we carry our product in various strengths ranging from 60 to 85%. With respect to some of the clinical studies that you were asking about, there's been an ample documentation of its beta-glucan's effectiveness as an immunomodulatory molecule in human clinical trials and its potent immune positive impacts. So, for example, in this particular clinical trial, this placebo-controlled condition where basically children were treated with an oral dose of 100 milligrams of glucan per day over the course of 30 days. The study found that beta-glucan supplementation in this form had a profound impact on various immune parameters, including a significant increase in proteins that are associated with our defensive line in our immune systems called immunoglobulins that are geared towards, again, pathogen detection. The study also actually found increased nitrogen oxide levels and actually improved overall physical endurance. What's really interesting is that similar findings keep coming up over and over again in a lot of these other orthogonally produced clinical trials that recapitulate the various different conditions and parameters. For example, the results are further recapped in another study involving adult patients. In fact, this particular study that I'm discussing were conducted in older adults who, again, were supplemented with beta-glucan and found a significant reduction in upper respiratory tract infections by boosting the innate immune response that I was alluding to earlier. And these findings are, again, recurring across multiple clinical trials. And intriguingly, some relatively newer studies indicate that beta-glucan supplementation also helps alleviate metabolic-related syndromes by decreasing immune resistance and dyslipidemia. Of course, some of those are a bit newer findings and a little bit tangential from sort of the immune-related benefits, but still interesting nonetheless. And I guess fundamentally what does hold true for sure is that beta-glucan is a relatively affordable yet effective way of stimulating the immune system to really help ward off potential pathogens and further infections.
How interesting. Now I have more questions for you as a result of what you were just saying. Is this something that as a strategy a consumer might take on a daily basis as part of their natural program? Or is it more likely something that they boost up at times when they are at risk? Is there any recommendations as to how best to use it over time?
In the end, it's up to the particular consumer and their particular needs. It's no new news that we know that as the older we get, our immune system is not quite as active and perhaps more in this sort of sleep slumber state. And in instances where perhaps as you get older and you get a little bit more concerned and you start noting that you're getting a little bit more sick more often, in these particular cases, you can imagine a daily use in their sort of regular regimen would be certainly appropriate and is certainly has been found to be safe and just fine. and well tolerated. But then, of course, an alternative perspective for a person who might be a bit younger, who feels that they have a pretty vibrant and viable immune system, may want to take it more as a prophylactic measure, again, maybe around the time of the seasonal flu or prior to traveling, or if they anticipate any reasons as to why they might need that little pick-me-up for their immune system.
Well, it's like a lot of things. It really depends on the individual, their normal immune status and what they're doing, all of those kinds of things. And suffice to say that somebody could try it, see how they like it. If they have a specific purpose, they would then observe and see whether they got those benefits. If you're taking it for, say, prevention over time, like I have found, I don't get sick as often as I used to because I take preventive measures all the time. As you say, a person can use it either of those ways, and everybody's different. They all have to figure out for themselves, is this the best target? And we want to give them the rationale that this at least makes very good sense. It has good clinical science behind it. And if they get a clinically studied trademark brand, Beta Immune Shield, for example, they're going to have assurances that they're getting the product that was used in the clinical studies and was shown to be effective in the clinical studies. One of the questions I always have about that is it possible for the consumer to get the same kind of dose that was used in the clinical studies? How similar is that dose that was used to the recommended daily use?
Sort of that range, recommended daily dose that's been found in the clinical trials range from 30 to 100 milligrams per day. And that's actually quite reasonable. And a lot of our clients who end up utilizing our raw ingredients to put into their products hit around sort of that range. So it's highly reasonable and highly actionable with respect to people who might want to take this on a daily basis or prophylactically in a temporal manner.
Now, one of the terms that you have mentioned is immunomodulation or modulation of the immune system. Could you explain what that means? What is it that we're accomplishing when we provide immunomodulation?
Immunomodulation, one can surmise from the overall sound of the word, is basically a way in which you can modulate or change your immune system. There's various methods in which our body will naturally find ways and molecular mechanisms to turn on and off the immune system at will and as needed. So you can, for example, imagine in the case in which your immune system needs to be in full force to combat an active viral invasion, the immune system will need to recruit and modify its activity levels in accordance to the needs that are required to fight off that particular infection. However, once your body has rid of the particular infection, you can imagine then it needs to prepare to ramp back down. So there are sort of these intracellular molecular processes and cell-to-cell contact and communication that occurs in order to help elicit these ramp up and ramp down ability of our immune system and its respective response.
So that sounds like it's not designed to necessarily push up the immune system or suppress the immune system as much as it is to aid the immune system to be responsive. Would that be a fair assessment?
That's absolutely correct. And to clarify on my end, what beta-glucan basically offers is the more subtle, gentle nudge in waking up our immune system. Again, the immune system is comprised of the innate and the adaptive immune processes. The adaptive process is the front of the line guards, if you will, that are responsible for the initial detection of a certain pathogen. What beta-glucan does is it serves as a recognition pattern, that molecular shape, that then will wake up our innate immune response to be on the lookout for any potential pathogens. And in that way, it does offer more of a subtle way of waking up the immune system as opposed to perhaps one that might be induced by a pathogen that will cause a full-blown inflammatory immune response.
Well, one of the things I really like that I've gotten out of this discussion was its effect on pathogens, because it's something that we all have to be concerned about. We live in a world of pathogens. We get exposed to people who are sneezing and coughing and have whatever other issues. So it is our immune system that keeps us healthy as we move through these pathogens. And so to know that there's something for the immune system that is targeted in that way. So oftentimes we hear this is good for the immune system. Well, in what way? So, and for what purpose? And so you've done a really good job of explaining how this actually exerts its effect, and this particular target of pathogens, I think that's one that we can all relate to, whether they be just the germs that give us colds and flus to whatever else we might encounter. It is going to be our own immune system that gives us that ability to fight back and to have this response. We're getting very near the end of our time, Jay. I've got just a few more questions for you. One of the things that I know, and this is just slightly off topic here, is that because Vesta makes a wide variety of raw materials and ingredients, I'm just curious, do they make other products that are also beneficial for the immunomodulation?
When we were initially surveying a lot of these similarly functioning immunomodulatory natural ingredients that are extremely safe but effective in helping to wake up our immune system to provide that prophylactic measure of ridding our body of pathogens in a more responsive manner, we actually came across another particular interesting product called fucoidan, which is actually naturally found within seaweed and offers the same molecular pattern, or PAMP, or PAMP, that is recognized by our immune system, and it helps gently nudge our immune system to become more alert and awake.
So is this one then that Vesta has also studied and makes available as a raw material at this point?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that in the future. Who knows? As I said, our time is going by so quick. I didn't want to get too far off topic, but I do want people to understand that there are different ingredients, different raw materials that have different benefits. And sometimes finding the right product is sometimes trial and error, but the more you know about these raw materials, and now we know a lot more about beta-glucan, we have a better reason to choose that particular product and that particular raw material. It's been so much fun to pick your brain today, Jay. Well, we're close to our time. Are there any last words that you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
If I may, recapping on fucoidan, also trademarked as ultrafucoidan, is basically, again, this complex polysaccharide that, again, offers a similar molecular shape mimetic that beta-glucan also exhibits to help naturally stimulate our immune system in order to appropriately recognize and combat a lot of the pathogens that try to invade our bodies. In that way, offer a prophylactic measure of combating future infections. So with that said, just a few last words. Essentially, I think it's really interesting that there are a lot of these products out on the market that, as you alluded to, make these immunomodulatory claims. And yet, oftentimes, in my own research and findings, I'll find that they really have a lackluster level of scientific evidence and backing. And I suppose that's just an aspect that I might offer up as a word of caution, that it's oftentimes important that as consumers, we stay engaged and do our due diligence to make sure and really fact check a lot of the natural product claims that might be out there. And for that very reason, I think we highly encourage any of your listeners actually to come visit our website, VestaIngredients.com, where we have a lot of really nice packaged pieces of information on our various ingredients, but also offer up a lot of the scientific backing and the reasons why we actually fundamentally believe in the ingredients that we've painstakingly invested in manufacturing.
Well, thank you for bringing out that about the website, because I want our listeners to know that you have these resources for more information. Believe me, folks, I know this is a challenging thing for consumers to do, to research product and to know who to have confidence in. It's one of the reasons we want you to look at these companies that we introduce to you through healthquestpodcast.com, because how are you going to know? At least we give you a foundation. You can look into this company. You can look into this raw material, and you can compare what you learn and what you experience with any other product on the market. But you have to believe that not all products are the same. Not all raw materials are the same. Not all manufacturers are the same. Not all supplement companies take the same care. And it's your money. It's your health. If you want the best results, you have to search out the best products. Now, it's tricky in the beginning, but it gets easier. As you do it, you find the companies, you find the ingredients, and then you go forward. And so that's what we're here to introduce to you, some of these concepts of how you as a consumer can move forward in this very tricky and oftentimes confusing marketplace. Well, Jay Hyeok from Vesta Ingredients, their technical consultant. It's been most interesting. I really love picking your brain and learning more about why these nutrients in particular have the kind of effects that they have. I want to thank you for being my guest today. It was most interesting.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Steve.
I wish you the best, and I look forward to any opportunity we have to speak.
Same as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jay. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye. If you would like additional information, please visit healthquestpodcast.com. We've provided additional details and links on the podcast page. Remember, this is your process of discovery. Continue to search, continue to learn. The more you know, the better choices you can make. Better choices lead to better outcomes. If you like healthquestpodcast.com, please recommend us to your friends and social networks. We sincerely appreciate every like, every star, and every review. Together, we can lead others to better health, one listener at a time. Thank you for joining me today. I'm glad you were here. Make it a good day and join me for another interesting HealthQuest podcast.
Thank you for joining us today on Health Quest. You want to improve your health? Health Quest can help. For more information and interviews that help you, visit healthquestpodcast.com.